When it comes down to decision making, there are two competing thought processes. One of those is logic and one of those is emotion. Now recently I made a video about why I was selling my Leica M240, and 6 months ago I was using very logical reasoning as to why it was being sold. So then why do I stand here now 6 months later with a Leica M10? A very emotional based decision when it came to buying it. And in this video, that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about my pretty complicated relationship with the Leica M series. This isn't going to be a Leica M10 review. One will be coming pretty soon on the channel. I just want to make sure I've gone past the honeymoon period before I actually give this camera a review. So that's what we're going to be doing in this video. So let's crack on. For me, it is the simple times where I don't really care about the result. The M10, since I've bought it, has been on kind of pub walks, it's been to coffee shops, it's taken random photos of the dog, flowers in the garden, stuff that ultimately I'm never going to sell. Nobody is ever going to buy any of these images I'm chucking up on the screen now. But the point is, I was never worried about the result in the first place. For me, I was trying to maximize the amount of fun I was having whilst taking them. Now, a really good example is probably a photo I took of the dog in the garden. This is an f2 shot of the dog moving towards me that I shot on the M10. Now, on the M10, that is not the easiest photo to take, and if I was to give the M10 to anybody else in my family, they would not be able to take that image. For me, there is something weirdly rewarding about using an M camera that feels like you're using a tangible skill. It feels good when I'm learning how to do something, and during that process of kind of crafting your own images, not relying on a computer, again, it aids to my enjoyment when it comes to these cameras. Now, it's definitely not easy to rationalise having a £3,000 piece of fun when it comes to photography, but I am going to have a little go at trying to rationalise it, and if you think I'm talking rubbish, let me know down in the comments, because I definitely am to some extent, and I'm validating my own purchase. But film photography used to be my other big creative outlet when it comes to having fun with photography. It's not just the results of film photography, it's the process, it's the cameras. Now for me, film photography has got one, really expensive, and two, a bit of a pain to source. So if you were to go and buy a roll of portrait film today, then get it scanned and developed externally, you're looking at over £30 a roll. If you turn rolls into kind of cameras, that means if you shoot 100 rolls of film, you've basically got yourself an M10 if you weren't to have done that. Now for me, that is definitely an element of film photography that has put me off this year, to the point that I now shoot very, very little film compared to last year. The other bit that's really annoying at the minute, even if you ignore cost, is just the scarcity of the stuff. If you want certain film stocks, sometimes you just can't get them and you have to wait. And it's the same with things like colour chemicals as well. So I reduced my costs down last year by doing an awful lot of the developing myself. But just getting the chemicals, because everybody else is now doing the same, is pretty tough. So I guess film photography this year for me has been a very, very small part of my photography compared to previous years. And I think that was part of the problem with the M240, was that it was competing with the M6 last year. This year, the M10 doesn't really have the M6 to compete with because I'm just shooting far less film. So I'm not sure if that justifies it, but hopefully that explains one of the things that has definitely changed, and not necessarily that I got wrong last year. This camera is definitely now filling that kind of film void a little bit in my life. So yeah, there we have it. Trying to validate my purchase a little bit, but let me know what you think down in the comments. Why Leica then? Like, all of this sounds great, but there is other cameras out there that try to kind of emulate this film-like experience. Now, first of all, when we actually talk about the colours, I don't believe a word of what some people will try and tell you in terms of Leicas having the most film-like colours when you take images. I don't believe it, and to be honest, if I was to pick a manufacturer, I'd probably pick Fuji, to be honest. I think Fuji gets closer to emulating them like film colours than a camera like this does. But importantly, it's not so much about the result, it's going back again to the process. There are other cameras that I've owned, like the Fuji X Pro 3, that is a camera that is all about the process. But why is it then that I've sold the X Pro 3 at this point and got an M10? What was it about the X Pro 3 that didn't quite fill this kind of digital void when it comes to experience? Now importantly, the X Pro 3 was a camera that was rangefinder styled. Ultimately, it isn't a rangefinder. I found myself with the X Pro 3 really wanting to kind of go for that manual experience, but it not working out. If I was to take that camera out, I found myself gravitating towards autofocus because the manual focus experience just wasn't that great. If I really wanted to manual focus, I then found that I needed to really ideally use the EVF and focus peaking. Now I'm looking at a screen that tells me a whole lot of other information, and to be honest, I spent half of my life in front of a screen and an EVF's not really helping me enjoy that process. Cameras like the X Pro 3, they're great cameras and I really enjoyed using it, but it really wasn't filling this kind of void in my life. Now, what does the process look like in terms of shooting this camera versus the M6? I would be using the same manual focus lens, changing the same aperture, changing a very familiar shutter speed dial, focusing myself, and taking images. Ultimately, it is exactly the same as the M6. Other than winding on to the next frame, the experience of shooting this camera along with the M6 is arguably identical. You can't get closer to that film-like experience with any other camera because no other camera is quite literally a film camera with a digital sensor inside. So hopefully that explains a little bit as to why the M makes sense as opposed to some of the other cameras that are really trying to emulate that experience, but I feel like they just don't quite make the cut. So there is one more thing, and that is the build and design of these cameras. It's really hard again to be rational about this kind of thing, but if I was to give this camera to somebody who is not interested in photography at all, they take it off me and they'll ask me things like, what's this? What's so special about this camera? Because it just feels different. If I was to give them a digital camera like my X-H2S, they probably wouldn't bat an eyelid. I think a really good way of kind of explaining this feeling is a little bit like if you were to give someone an Apple Watch versus a nice steel automatic watch. The Apple Watch is better in arguably every single way, but if you were to give them to somebody, you'll more likely get questions about the steel watch because there's just something about the design, the engineering, the feel that gives you like an emotional feeling when you hold a steel watch. And I think it's very, very similar with the M series of cameras, and this links back to, I guess, why is it that I keep selling these cameras then? You've just talked about why you really like them, and I think it comes down to that logic versus emotional decision making. I am a logical seller of cameras, I sell them when they don't make sense, and I am an emotional buyer of cameras. I buy them because they make me sometimes feel something. And the M240, when I let it go, was a very logical decision. And when it came to buying the M10 this time, it was a very emotion-driven decision. And that's ultimately why I think I have this complicated relationship with them, because I sell them and I buy them based on two very separate feelings. And I'm also not saying that logic or emotion is better than each other. The X-H2S that I've bought recently is a very logical decision, and I love the camera because of it. It literally makes my videos better. The M10 was a very emotional decision, and I'm also equally as happy with it. So you definitely need to have a balance of the two, but be conscious of why you bought it in the first place. Don't buy a camera emotionally and then sell it logically and think you'll be happy on the other side. If you've enjoyed this video though guys, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you've got any thoughts, comments, you felt similar to me, then let me know down in the comments, and I'd really be interested to get back to you as well. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Cheers.